Hello and welcome to another video. Pleased to have you here. And today I wanted to share my recent realizations on openness, letting go, and integration. So you may already have connotations, you already may have concepts, and I just want you to put those aside for the next, few minutes and just allow this new interpretation, this new wisdom to land and see if it feels right, see if it feels true. Okay? And we're going to start with how what these concepts are and how they can help you, but in I think honest fashion this is going to be something that I'm going to share from my experience and how I've come to understand these things. These aren't things I've always known. These are things that I've come to be aware of, either their subtleties, their mechanisms, the sort of experienced and hard-earned experience in some cases, because when you lack that wisdom of these concepts or you've lived them, then your life can go askew. It can go the way you don't want it to go. And there's a kind of peace that doesn't come from having more or doing more or knowing more, but just evolving from your being. You go through an experience and you learn the lessons and you become more. So this level of becoming is kind of what I help people with and how I choose to guide people. And if you're familiar with this first concept, openness, it's all these things are hard to explain because you know them and you can come up with analogies or experiences, but if the other person hasn't lived that, it may be challenging. But that's why we're here. We're going to give it a go. And yeah, let's start with openness. So, openness to me comes in three parts: your mind, your heart, and your body. And the reason these three are distinct is because there's a distinct level of awareness for each of them. The body is very much in the physical reality, and if there's something in your environment or physically going on or how you react to something, that could have a physical connotation. And it's worth now explaining that a contraction or a closing or a non-open state, because really the default for growing and handling a situation is an open state. And the mind, the second one, is in a mental sort of thought aware plane, and the heart is in a feeling type emotional connection based plane of openness. And you could imagine in a situation, and a situation that I've been in is where, for example, you're talking to someone and maybe you don't like the way they said something. And this is like a preconditioned pattern or habit of potentially thinking, feeling, or physical contraction, right? Tension. And so this could cause a level of reaction in your body, your heart, or your mind. And from my experience, if you open to the present moment, you're able to almost maturely handle the present moment, then it's sort of like the world's your oyster, sort of thing. So you end up learning a lot more, and you end up allowing a lot more. And I'm going to explain in that example because, say, if a horrific situation happens outside of you and you end up being ill-equipped to respond immediately, your mind is going, you're riddled with anxiety, or your feelings are out of control and you're paralyzed and it's draining all your energy and it's just perpetuating, and maybe your body is like generated all this tension and constriction and stress that it can't perform and begins to dysfunction. These are sort of the symptoms, the sort of the point you don't want to get to in terms of, but sometimes you have to because you haven't learned how to handle it from that point before. So the optimal sort of position in this would be, situation happens, I notice immediately in my body, heart, mind, that there's non-openness. I'm not fully open to the present moment. And I open up. And I think that's kind of an oversimplification in so many ways, because different situations for different people are going to cause different reactions or have preconditioned patterns and habits that they have. So one situation or one sensation for another person would cause a different level of closing. And one person, this isn't better or worse, but it's moving towards the understanding of what is the mechanism and what is possible. So I can now go through situations where in the past I would heavily, close, and my body would have, physical symptoms of illness, and I would be riddled with anxiety. And now I can go through the exact same situation and just cruise through with a smile on my face, and it rolls off you. Nothing actually touches you because you can handle the present moment, you can handle the situation, and you just sort of you're open to the present moment, you can handle it. And that's really what it is in essence. It's, I can handle whatever comes at me. That would be like a level of 100% openness. And it's worth mentioning that this openness can be in a response to the present moment, but also it can be a state that we're now stuck in. And say I'm 30% open in my heart. And that's not due to this present moment, that's due to the sort of rigidity and the habits that have just gradually made me unable to really connect to people or to be present or to care for someone. And now when I go in these situations, theoretically, I'm lacking something because I don't have that sort of prerequisite of openness. And so then it's even harder, you could imagine, to be in a situation where I'm already not open. I come into a situation where it maybe requires me to be more open than usual, or it's like almost like the moment is like, come on, this is your opportunity. And I think that's a really powerful reframe, because lots of people think that in these closed states, that this is like the beginning of the end. But that's not the case at all. It's actually the opposite. So it's an opportunity. And this opportunity is, right, you've reacted to this present moment. And now you have the opportunity to open before any of the sort of cascading symptoms of tension, stress, constriction, distortions, patterns, habits, the sort of perpetuation of this suffering, this non-openness. And that ability to then make that choice, to then start unlearning all those patterns and habits, and the choice to remain open, or the choice to notice when I close and then open, it's all the same thing. Because you're learning this skill, you're becoming more equipped, you're maturing in how you can handle more situations, the full scale of, the human experience. And that is openness. And I hope that makes sense. And those examples helped. And this sort of is highly related to the next two, because integration and letting go are almost the before and the after. So letting go really it is before openness, and the integration is what happens after. So we're going to talk about the before. I know I didn't go in sequence here, but they're highly related. They're all happening at the same time, so there isn't a legitimate sequence, but they happen. If you pay attention, you will notice that these happen in an order. So if we go to the beginning, you have letting go. So this is, in its essence, a lot more subtle and harder to understand, and harder for people to say, well, harder for people to receive the advice of just let go. That's close to useless advice, because really there's so much in that subtle sort of wisdom that has to be experienced. That is objective observation, as I understand it. So this equanimity that you can develop in observing, noticing something arise in consciousness, and just looking at it as the subject and the object. And with that realization comes, I am not the thing I am observing, and this thing can, just disappear, dissolve, dissipate. And when you stop feeding something in that really intimate but subtle way, then you notice this objective observation as you get better at this skill. You hone your focus, your mindfulness, your awareness, these really subtle things. And it's why I don't often talk about the more subtle practice of letting go all the time, is because it's hard for people to grasp if they haven't experienced it. And so an experience of not letting go would be that I've personally had in the past, when I was sort of willed to learn all of this information, or had the opportunity to learn all of this because it was a requirement for me to get out of my current state. And when you're not objectively observing, you start thinking that the sensations that you're experiencing, the thoughts, the feelings, the body, the mind, the world in front of you, you confuse this for yourself, and this causes like a huge feedback loop and accelerating sort of downward spiral of misery. And it's maybe in slow motion for a lot of people, but I was fortunate enough for mine to be in like fast forward, right? So I was heavily identified with the mind the body, sensations, the situation, my health at the time, and all these things crumbled in front of me. And I was left feeling and noticing that I would experience something in the body, and this would cause a negative reaction in the mind because I thought I was the body. I then would judge and critique and almost add negativity onto this negativity of the mind, just because I thought that was my conditioning at the time. And then that would then cause physical ailments and illness in the body, which then came back to the mind. And I had this sort of downward spiral to mental, physical, disharmony. And the way out of this was, late at night, I'm sort of, can't sleep, sleeping like 3 hours a night, and feeling lots of things, but there's this subtle shift that happened, which is, oh, okay, I'm not actually the thing I'm aware of right now, and I can just observe the discomfort in the body. I can observe the thoughts in the mind. I can observe the feelings in the heart. I can observe this respiration. I can observe the sensations. And this objective observation, like being super objective, just being like, this is as it is, right? Was just super eye-opening and liberating in lots of ways, and started me on this continued journey of, Vipassana, meditation, esoteric sort of knowledge seeking. And I was already very heavy in the sort of self-improvement mind body level, but I didn't understand that training and honing your awareness in these sort of more subtler mechanisms of openness, letting go, that is the sort of the end of misery in lots of ways, or at least the beginning of the end, And again, these are incredibly hard things to grasp if you haven't experienced them on some level. Maybe you can conceptually, intellectually understand, but obviously I would heavily advise, you learn to experientially verify everything. Don't take me at my word. Sounds crazy because that's all I'm giving you right now. I'm giving you my word. But try and put this stuff into practice and, verify it for yourself, because all these things are verifiable, maybe not immediately, but certainly. The last one we're going to talk about is integration. And so you can imagine we've done all the letting go. We've honed that objective observation. We're able to handle the present moment and open whenever we notice a contraction or non-openness. And then what happens after this is a sort of transmutation from information to wisdom. And another way of thinking about that is experience to sort of lessons learned, or the insight of the present moment into your being. And so those things are roughly equivalent, right? And integration often is associated with symptoms. And this is something I've realized, is that when you've neglected the letting go and the openness, and you get to the point of integration, when you've started learning those prerequisites, is that undoing that that reduction of entropy into this largely complex amalgamation of information, maybe stored as tension in the body, maybe stored as defilements in the mind, maybe distortions on your belief system and stuff like that. That process is like an almost decay or an integration into like a singularity. Take something very complex and compression, like a compression algorithm in computer science, is when it's happening to your body and mind. Maybe obviously, now that I've explained it like compression, you could imagine that would be slightly painful. And it's important that at this step you don't get in the way. You don't push away that sort of natural mechanism of compression, or in some way like a mini death, which would probably be scary to a lot of people right now. But it's like the negative part of you that you hadn't learned the lesson from. And so transmuting a sort of fumbled present moment or an honest mistake of the past would be something that then requires that reintegration into your being, into positivity. And this can happen on a mental level, an emotional level, or even like the combination of the two, which is like your field, your sort of aura in a sense. And these integrations look wildly different across people. So you may notice post integration that things change and your body now functions in more harmony, or that you're able to pick up skills that you can now acquire and integrate. And so this integration process is super powerful, but often the more painful side of spiritual growth is that it requires this like radical commitment. Otherwise, you don't go through these mechanisms because they require too much sort of courage and compassion and curiosity. But we'll get into those later. Yeah. I hope this was helpful. I hope you took something away. And I wish you all the wisdom and insight that you gain here and after. And if you want to know more, you want to hear more, you want to work with me, then visit true-coherence.com. It's not spelled out hyphen, it's just a literal dash. And yeah, let's reach out and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.